should be like this. Oh, so yeah, there were some changes since last year. I was working. Had a chance to work with in couple of companies during that time. So as you can see, I work longer in one company, then I go through the other, and now I'm working in one current company. The names are not important. I want to just tell you some story about how I feel, and maybe how you will feel when you join a new company. And because you know, going through a few companies, you're gonna have new code, you're gonna have little knowledge about the business processes. You haven't wrote that code. There is new business. There's no owners, or maybe they forgot what's going on. There is new environment in which you develop. So in the first company, most of code, I was the designer. I was the owner of code, or at least somebody talked to me about the code. In the other companies, it was actually differently. So usually, when you try to do something in new company, at least me, I will go and look at the tests. And well, not always those tests are ideal, but at least it's something to start with, right? So what I'm going to talk about is how tests influence your work, and you should care about them. And probably most of those stuff will be very, very obvious and repeated many times, but I think that it's still important. So why we care, right? So there is a buzz factor. I already said that I was this old guy who has a lot of understanding about the system, and then suddenly I was a newcomer. And but that's not about my comfort zone, right? It's about it's actually beyond that. It's really serious, and it should be easy for new people to understand those business cases. It should be visible why some decision was made in the past. Why? So you see the impact. You know, somebody decide that like, because you look at the code and you have no idea. You look at the test, you have no idea. Nobody made those decisions explicit enough in the code, right? Or maybe probably somebody who owned the code died and nobody knows, right? So so I think it's also important when you look at the code, and especially in the test, it's important to define those explicitly the happy paths and corner cases as well, right? So there needs to be some balance, but I think still it's very important. Fake news is when somebody tells you that your system should behave in the way, and actually you don't know. Somebody defined those rules, but there are some gray areas, that maybe it should behave like that or maybe not. And again, you don't know. You're not certain about how your application behaves, right? So tests will help you limit those gray areas and drive your design for your API, and maybe will show you the different strategies. But also you're documenting the behavior of the application, right? And you're defining inputs, you're defining outputs, and what errors are possible, like good results. And it just helps reducing noise. It helps go faster, right? That's very obvious thing, right? Let's catch all bugs early. So That's the part of this driven design way of developing. Yeah, and all this boils down to speeding up the production cycle, right? So it's not about only the business, but also about how you work with the code. So you have this tooling. You can check out the code, or your colleague can check out your code, and just see some patterns. You can go and recognize that, okay, here are tests, here are something else. I know how to run those tests. I know how to build application, and it just helps to get into speed. You don't need additional dependencies, like, oh, by the way, you have to check out this repository, but remember that you need to install the database also to run it. And no, you don't want to do something like that, right? And of course, you don't need, you shouldn't be forced to read like some Confluence pages somewhere, and that are outdated, nobody knows, nobody cares, right? So this speeding production cycle is also very important. If we talk about microservices, then we also, microservices are working together with other applications, other services. So they are going to define some communication protocols, but also they're going to have different life cycles. They're going to evolve, and you need to care about that. Also, you need to test behavior of those applications. What if your downstream service dies? What if, I don't know, you want to change the communication schema, you want to, I don't know, do something. That's also where tests can help you, and it's very good to actually have this kind of testing. Also, you would like to test like validation of data, which maybe some of you will just smile, yeah, it's obvious, but it's not that everybody does that, right? So I think it's very important to reiterate and remind ourselves that there are simple things, but we should just do them, right? About defining contracts, so you are defining some APIs. You are defining APIs, and you want to maintain them. So it means that you want to be somehow backward compatible, and that means also when you design your service, is about what is public, what's not. And here again, tests can show you that you're doing something really terribly wrong. Maybe your private state leaks to the public space, and questions like, who is using your service, or can I drop this or that field? You know, can I stop supporting this part of application, or it's safe to change it, right? And backward compatibility. Also, there are companies that tries to work with different technology stacks in different projects, which for me is terrible, but they do. So again, there are some contracts between your services. It would be nice to actually test that contract. I mentioned Pocoyo. Actually, I've heard about that like half a year ago. So I'm not a big you know, like hacker. I have no idea maybe about the half of the project or the functionalities, but I'm using it now in my current work, and I must say, from the theory, pact is great. So what I said, you want to actually test those contracts. And there is a web registry where you can just log in, and then you can see the connections between different services. You can see, you know, like a lot of the contracts themselves, and it helps. Definitely, it helps, especially when you have a lot of microservices. and there is a good documentation too, so yeah, I like it from this perspective. But there are a lot of bad things, at least for me, because the Java library is totally, separate project. And I found sometimes it was very hard to read documentation for it. For Java, the way you define the contract was very verbose. And a lot of stuff is done by defining some strings, and those will mean something in those contracts. And I think that's something I don't want to do. I would like to have something simpler. Also, what's bad for me is the pact is consumer first. So you have to define the contract first from the perspective of the client, and then publish it, and then the service can actually consume the contract and implement their side. For me, I worked totally differently in the past. So for me, that's something I don't like, and also for me, it's time consuming. So because you have to actually build your application that is going to consume the API, produce the spec, publish it, and then you can start working on your service. And then if you are going to design your contract from the first in the way that it's ideal, it's finished, that's fine. But if not, you forgot about something, then you have to go back, and it's very tiring to think about that. And what you want, you know what your API are going to be usually. You're designing it for yourself, and I think for me it's too much hassle. So I would change it. I know that the pact, there is alternative to pact. There is something for Spring. I also know that the Spring version is a very huge thing. So I don't know. I have no experience in that Spring project. So if you want to investigate, if you want to deep into the contract testing, pact is a good start. But for me, it's not ideal. Also the problem is that we have Java almost everywhere. So why not just have a contract in the client library and then ship the models? That will define your contract. Everybody that can want to communicate with you, they have the client provided by you, and then that's it. You cannot do anything else. And just publish it somewhere, the information that I'm the consumer of the API and I'll be using this version. That's something really what pact should do or similar library should provide, just a registry where you can go and send this information. I'm using you, be careful. Also the pact, I couldn't configure it with JUnit 5. I have no idea. I tried for a couple of hours, and then I decided, okay, it's not worth it. Also, I saw a lot of people are just defining very basic pacts because they don't care. They want to just get the shit done, and that's all. They want to just provide something because they now have the contract test, but they don't think about the contracts themselves. They just defining very basic contracts because they are not going to maintain the service. So for me, the whole concept of being the consumer first is very tricky, and I just wanted to mention that. So okay, so that was this, what are my complaints? Why testing is good, right? I will tell you now more about the art of testing, which is a big name. But we know that there is a pyramid, right? There should be just some unit tests, integration, end-to-end, and because you want to focus on different parts of your application in different ways. So probably you should be familiar with this. And I think that tests should guide your design of the application, right? But you need to have those tools to deliver, to deliver those tests and execute them and work with them. And I think if you can just focus on tests and not focusing on on this environment. And like you have to think, okay, I don't have this, I would like to have that. The other project is done differently. Oh, those guys have this, so should I copy it here or should not? There's a lot of questions if you don't do it right. And I think also that if somebody tells you that tests are slowing him down, I don't know what to answer. Like if your tests are slowing you down, then you're doing something terribly wrong. Like you have machines that can almost fly to the moon and back, right? So this machine has 32 gigabytes and few cores. So no, they shouldn't slow you down. You're just doing something really bad. And also waiting to get some result from testing, and if they are flaky, then also that's just the technical debt, right? So you have to prioritize that and just manage this. I've seen people just building application and pushing them to some test environment. So like that's one idea, but I'm now bigger fan of the integration test and unit test. Also, I've seen the company I work now and the previous company, they haven't provided any environment for end-to-end testing. So they were only relying on the integration and unit test. So, well, in my first company, we focused mostly on on each layer. So we had really a lot of test cases in end-to-end space, and I think that still it's needed, but that's the decision of of each team, and I am not against that if that works for you. So so now I will mostly focus on the integration part rather than on the unit test or the end-to-end test. Yeah. So if we talk about integration test, we want to actually check whether my service works, whether it's backward compatible, whether I'm doing right integration of my all layers of application. And I think that those tests are showing you, the integration test, showing you what you actually want to change. If you're changing integration test, then but you didn't want to change API, then maybe something's wrong. Maybe you just wanted to touch unit tests, and so yeah, I think that those different layers of the testing are also important. And I think that if we talk about testing, I think we should never debug. We should just write tests. It should be as easy as write tests, and then have those tests there and repeat them every time the application builds. Yeah, that's self-explanatory, so I don't want to go into that. But that's also for unit tests and also for integration tests. I think I already talked about parts of it. If you have your application is talking to your, for example, database. There's some people who say, okay, where to do testing with the database? Unit tests, integration tests, or maybe nothing. I would say that we just get the database that is in memory, that is easy enough to spin up and just talk to it. Doesn't matter whether there's unit test or integration test. But what's crucial for me, if you talk to different service or this database, I've seen projects where those integration, this part of the application that talk to downstream service, were just removed and replaced. And for me, that's a disaster, because you're just removing parts of application that you want to test. Actually, that's very important part of your application. And yeah, so what happens when the downstream replies slowly, when there is no reply? Will your application heal? And many other things. So please don't mock your communication components. And yeah, I think that's mostly it. At the top of, I already said that at the top of this pyramid, there should be some like scale tests, failover tests. I'm not a big fan of them being in the integration scope. I think that they should be beyond integration test. Also, end-to-end tests for me are very important. So I don't know what you want to. That's your choice. Performance tests are a totally different story, I think. I've seen in configuration where there were some performance tests done in during the build, but nobody actually look at those tests, right? So look at the results. So that's I don't know. I feel like they're useless then. So tools. I will focus mostly on Java. So if you're working with Kotlin or Scala, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't want to take your time. And there are existing tools. Probably most of you are working with Spring, and I don't know how many of you are working with Spring, but probably a lot. And there already are some ways to spin up your application. You have the mighty annotation that will do something for you. But you can also write your own implementation of this tool that will allow you to test. The only problem with your own implementation will be that it's rarely designed for the interoperability to that maybe some other team can reuse it and stuff like that. So think about this when you write your own, and also seen that teams are writing their own tools for testing. Yeah. So I wanted to highlight a few things that I feel are important. I think I will focus on Spring. I will focus on Docker and something that I've written like 2 years ago for our company. So I will go like whether that's the industry standard or not. Manage test execution. So should I do something in order to find and run tests, right? Black box tests, right? So can I those two black box tests that are allowed to temper? They are mostly the same from the different angle. Can I actually change my application, or is the same application that I'm testing will be deployed to production, right? Support to change states of running applications. So this is not exactly the same because yeah, state of application and configuration, like configuration of beans, are different things. You want to have the application that will be the same, the code will be the same, but then you would maybe want to change some state. Support mock setup. So integration tests are rarely only about the application itself. You need to have some dependencies like database, other application. Initialization order. This is very important because it's unusual that you're deploying something and you're deploying everything at once. Your other application, databases, I don't know, everything at once. So you want to somehow feel like you have control what's there, and then you can start maybe your application. Easy debug. And that's all. I said that you shouldn't debug, but sometimes you just want to start this debugger and just see something, especially where you fresh the code, you have no idea what the application is doing. Support declarative setup. I think that's important because code is always bad. If you want to copy the code, copy the implementation, you will always mutate this implementation in your setup, and then you will diverge, and there will be some old implementation, your new implementation. You will have then another implementation, and when you declare, you can easily copy declaration. That's you can change declaration. It's still declaration. Configuration as code. It's nice if you don't have to do it in some text file or something like that. Support multiple application setup. So that's something I've seen setups where somebody wanted to test how load is routed between two applications. So yeah, so that's something more more sophisticated, right? If we go to Spring, Spring, I already said that there is this mighty annotation that this runner, you have this runner and you can do whatever you want with your Spring context, and it's disaster. It's mostly disaster. If something allows you to change your bin configuration, if it allows you to switch parts of your application or something like that, then I don't know. I would usually I would say that it's very, very bad, and usually you don't have a need to do that. And people are doing this because they want to stop testing part of application because it's hard. So rather than focusing on how to make this how to make this testing easy, they focus how to just close their eyes and move on, right? And in Spring Boot, they just rename it. It's now Spring Runner, so it's easier now to put the run with annotation. Yeah. So with Spring, I will say you have it's standard. Everybody should know it. Most of you know. You have it manages test execution because it will find all your test cases and run them. But it allows you to tamper with bin configuration and so on and so on. So for me, it's not bad, but I would say that it could be better. I think they try to achieve too much. Test containers, I'm really happy with this library. I think that's the most important stuff that was introduced a few years ago. And if you're not using test containers, you should start using test containers. And test containers are coming with the feature that they can accept the Docker compose file. And then it's up to the compose what will be bring up, and then you can start talking with some ports, right? So there is some layer of interconnection with this Docker compose, and mostly that's it. But the problem with this is that it just takes time. Sometimes you want to spin too much, and everything is in Docker containers. So then you are using a lot of memory, a lot of time and you want to iterate on your tests. So, you fail and start and fail and start. So it's sometimes very tricky. Plus, in order to use Docker container, you need to build your application. So it's also additional time where every time you need to produce something that is executable that Docker can run. You cannot just change and compile a few classes by IDE. You have to actually build your application, and it can take time, right? It takes time. Docker Compose itself is not opinionated. It's a very general solution. So you can do whatever, and usually people are doing bad things there. Yeah, so right now I have like 6 to 8 gigabytes only for Docker because there are some configuration like that. So I would say that's just too much. Also logging, it's very, very bad. Sometimes you don't have idea what's going on. You need to be very familiar with the environment in order to find something. So it's also it also depends how somebody from your team configured it earlier. Then it might be nice or not. Also, Docker is not giving you the way to start Dockers in certain order. So they used to have this, but now they remove it. And debugging is hard, and especially at the early state of the application. So this looks something like this. You just need to provide your compose YAM, and then inside the YAM you just name your container my service 1. Then you can just somehow get the port and the host, and then you can start communicating with it, right? So it's very basic, but it's something. So again, Docker Compose should be familiar. It's totally black box. There's no way of changing the state of the application. You build it, you pack it in Docker, you start it. That's it. You have no control what's going on inside, and which is sad. Debugging, you can always expose debug port, but it's not that nice, right? But you can do whatever, right? You can spin up many applications under test. You can really lose control, and your imagination is the limit. Also, Docker Compose allows you to start your dependencies because they are just different containers. Okay, about the canaveral. So it's not only me. I have only 3 minutes, but canaveral. I wanted to take the good parts from the Spring, so have a way to be in the kind of black box. So I'm not tampering with my bean configuration, but I wanted to be very flexible. We are supporting now the JUnit 4, 5, testng, so why not? Lifecycle. I think it's very important to reason about the lifecycle of your testing. So first, you want to start your mocks. You want to wait till they are ready. Then you want to start your application, and again assert that the application is starting, because it's not. You don't want to continue. You don't want to wait 5 minutes and then realize that something was broken, right? And then you want to also start additional tools, like, I don't know, I want to spin my client for my server and start using this client, and everything should be very easy to test, right? To set. Visibility, you have nice logging, and I already mentioned test context. Test context is everything that doesn't belong to mocks or doesn't belong to application. So that's something separate where you can inject parts of the application, like you want to inject the same object mapper, for example, or you want to inject, I don't know, some clock. Just examples, right? So, but you want to have it separately from the application, because I've seen a lot of setup where you don't know where to put those beans. You want to still be using beans, like, I know, Spring CI, dependency injection, but you don't want to mess with some strange places, right? You want to do it properly. Also, test context should have their own test properties, and application should have their own test properties. Yeah, independence and extensibility. So it's very light. There's nothing there. There's only a few interfaces that you have to implement, and that's it. So I will just show you quickly. I will show you quickly maybe some code, but I want to say that it's not standard, right? It's something me and my previous team was using. Manages test execution, and you can read all about. So I think it was quite a nice solution for those problems. And let me just quickly go to to show you. Can you see this? I hate Macs. Yeah. So this is what I was saying about the configuration as code, but still that's the declaration. You declare that you want to have HTTP mock, and you want to have some kind of rules, and then the canaveral will take care of resetting, about providing the right state. Also, you want to have centralized place when you're setting your global properties. You have some way to define how your application works. So here is just a Spring Boot implementation, but you can actually provide whatever that you know how to run and expose through the port, local port, and yeah, then you can have a Spring text context. So quickly, let's see how does work. It's nothing strange. Yeah. So no, sorry, that's not this. This one. Sorry. Yeah. So that's very basic, right? You can say, I want to reuse my application configuration. We are in the Spring, right? If you want to use something different, we would probably use, I don't know, the juice or something like that. But I want to reuse parts of it, and then I want to say, I want to spin my REST client, and I want then to move this REST client to base test, for example, here. So you just say inject test bin or inject mock. That was this HTTP server, and then you can as easy. So this is familiar, right? You should be familiar with that. It's very easy to manage state. It's very easy to inject things, and I think that's much better. And I think we were really happy with the solution, and then adopted this among many projects. So that's it. I hope that I somehow motivate you to still invest in testing. And if you have any question, just go ahead. Thank you.
I think that we are out of time, but having in mind that this is the last presentation, we can be a little bit more liberal about time frames. So there's one question. Is there still have some time, so you may ask any other, because the only question right now, the only one with 5 votes is, why do you hate Macs?
Macs, because they are unpredictable. They are doing things. But yeah, I don't know how that was related to testing, but maybe they didn't test that much.
Any other question to Paweł?
Okay.
I think it's already late.
Cool.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you.